Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Maddie if you're new. Today I wanted to start a little series here where I'm going to be talking about things I wish I knew going into buying a house, renovating a house, and decorating a house. Just a little background, we actually did all of those things back in Colorado. Several years ago, we bought our first house and ended up fully renovating it, thinking it would be our forever home, and it was not. And so we ended up selling it pretty recently, and now we're back on the house hunt in a different state. I'm now living in South Carolina, and we are here looking for a new house. And so I feel like there's a lot that I learned both the first time around house hunting and the second time around here, like right now as I'm doing it again. And I thought it would be fun to share with you guys things that I think you should know if you're going into like the house hunting process, just to make sure you're making the right decision and the most informed decision, because buying a house is like probably the most expensive thing you'll ever buy, hopefully. So I do have some tips for you, some things to keep in mind, some red flags to like look out for. And I've broken this up into some different sections. So the first section I want to talk about is things you should do before you see a single house. So I think that before you look at a single house on Zillow or walk into any open houses, make a list of your must-haves and your nice-to-haves and prioritize it. That probably seems obvious, but I think a really good way to put together this list, instead of just being like, oh, we want 3 bedrooms, we want 2 bathrooms, we want a really big yard, like I think a better way of figuring out what is actually on your must-have list versus just what you want. Think about your daily routine, your weekly routine. What do you do from when you wake up in the morning to when you go to bed? What do you do, and what do you need your house to sort of accommodate? This is gonna look so different for every single person, but just a few examples. Like for me, I work from home, so I need some sort of space to have my desk. I determined it doesn't necessarily have to be a room where I can close the door. It could be just a little alcove in one of the main living areas or bedrooms. I love to film like I'm doing right now, and also natural lighting is just important to me in general, but having a lot of windows is important to me. You know, it doesn't have to be like a whole wall of windows like at my last house in my office, but just like natural light is really important to me. Something I do every day is walk my dog. So I want to live in a neighborhood where I can walk out my door and have a safe, cute neighborhood to walk in. We don't have any kids yet, but we do want to have kids. So again, thinking about ideally how many bedrooms we'd like to have, but also how many do we truly need? Do we think in the next 5 years that we're going to have 3 kids that each need their own bedroom? No. So really just sort of thinking about, okay, we probably need 3 total bedrooms in this next house. You get the idea. Think about your life, your daily routine, and just get so honest about your true needs. Also make a list of the things that you want, which is really like the nice to haves. And that way when you're house hunting, you want to make sure that all of your needs are met and some of your nice to haves or wants are met. Also, before you see any houses, what kind of goes along with this must have list is the price tag, your budget. So figure out, like, do the math. I'm not a financial advisor by any means, but do the math on what you can put down, you know, for your down payment and what you want your mortgage to be, like what you can afford to comfortably pay monthly. There's like a bunch of calculators that tell you like, okay, if this is the cost of the house and you put X amount down with taxes and, you know, insurance and all of this stuff, here's your estimated monthly payment. Pay attention to that and figure out, okay, what's the absolute highest monthly payment that we could comfortably pay? What's like our ideal monthly payment? You know, that kind of thing. If we put this much down, and that will in turn give you your budget. All very self-explanatory, but I think what I just want to stress, and I'm just speaking from my own personal experience as we're doing this right now, once you have that number, do not, under any circumstances, go above that number. Don't even like look at too many houses outside of your budget on Zillow. Keep your sort of filters just within your budget, because what's been happening with us is we got really disappointed about what we could actually afford in this area. And so we started to convince ourselves that we could maybe spend more. And then, you know, we started looking at some more expensive houses, and it just keeps like, you can just want more and more. And so to have this list to come back to, that's what you truly need and what you truly need to spend, is so important. We made the mistake last time around of getting into a situation where our monthly payment was just too high, and we were very stressed about money pretty much the entire time we lived in that house. And we ended up selling it so that we could buy a much smaller house, a much cheaper house, and have a lower monthly payment so that we would not be stressed about money and we could actually save. So I know I'm like kind of going off into a lecture, but that is by far the most important thing, because it affects your life so much, how much you're spending. Okay, let's get into the fun stuff though. The next thing I want to talk about is location. Location is obviously one of the most important things to look at when you're purchasing a house, because you can't change the location. You're gonna make sure that you like your proximity to things. So from the house, where will you go to the grocery store? Where will you go to work? You know, what roads will you have to use, and are they super trafficy? And now someone is using a circular saw outside. If you have kids, you can think about school district and things like that. One thing I really recommend doing is looking at the house that you're sort of considering buying, going on Zillow and really looking at all the houses around it. You can obviously drive around and look at all the houses in person too, but on Zillow it will tell you, you know, what they were purchased for last and when. They give you a Zestimate, which can be really helpful. It's just their estimate of what it would sell for today. But it's important to figure out where your house or your potential house sort of sits amongst all of the houses around it, sort of value wise, because you don't want to be buying the most expensive house in a neighborhood, because then if you do end up turning around and selling it, which you never know, you might think this is for your forever home, but you have to hedge your bets a little bit just in case. If you were to turn around and sell it, the value would probably not have a lot of room to increase if it's already the most expensive property around you. If you're buying the cheapest or like least nice house in a neighborhood, then whatever you do to that house is really going to increase the value, because it's a desirable neighborhood. All the houses around it are sort of like propping up its value. So all of the money that you put in, you will get back, and probably then some, versus the other way around. It's a little bit trickier to sort of like get your investment back, if that makes sense. One thing I want to say that we learned from experience literally just a week or so ago, we actually were under contract on a house that we were so excited about, and we had only ever been there after business hours and on the weekends, which we didn't really realize until we went over for the inspection, which was in the middle of a weekday, and we heard the loudest lumber yard ever right behind the backyard, like right up against the backyard. And I walked out there. This was the cutest house. It had a giant backyard. It had chickens, and I was like so excited. I was thinking about spending all my time in the backyard, you know, planting and all of that stuff, and just like living such a peaceful life out there, and even thinking about like my future children spending so much time out there. And I can't even tell you how disappointed I was when I walked out the door during the inspection and it sounded like I was standing in the middle of a lumber yard. It was so loud, and it wasn't like the kind of thing that I could kind of get over, because it wasn't like, oh, there's like really loud birds or like a dog nearby or even like a playground with kids. Like it sounded so industrial, and so it was not peaceful. It didn't feel neighborhood-y. It was butt up against this giant lumberyard where like you just hear the beep, beep, beep of like these trailers picking up wood, dropping wood, like so loud and disappointing. But anyway, thank God we went that weekday for this inspection, because we immediately pulled out because I said to my husband, I can't, like, I don't think this is worth it. Like, we were paying a ton for this house, and if it bothered me, it was certainly going to bother someone who we would try to sell the house to 10 years from now. So yeah, it just was not for us. But anyway, the point is, make sure that you're checking out the house at all hours of the day and at all sort of like times of the week, if that makes sense. Go on weekends, go on weekdays, go at night, and get the vibe. Make sure, you know, there's no loud noises, but also make sure maybe that it doesn't feel sketchy at night. Just all the things that you might need to suss them out, because you might think, oh, it'll be fine, but you don't want to spend all of your money and then start moving into this house and realize that there's a deal breaker that you should have known about. Another thing I like to pay attention to is, who are my neighbors gonna be? So what's really helpful, especially around now because it's like election time, you can really see where your neighbors stand by looking at the signs all around, like in their yards and stuff. So that can be helpful. It obviously is not a make or break. If my neighbors don't have the same political views as me, it's okay. But I will say that driving through, especially now living in the South, driving through a street and seeing like a lot of liberal signs out in people's yards, for me personally, is a big thumbs up. And so yeah, that's just something to be mindful of. Okay, so that's location. Now let's start talking about layout and features of the home itself. So these are things to keep in mind when you're looking on Zillow, but mostly when you are actually in the house touring it, either in an open house or with your agent. And I'm focused on things that you can't change, or that you can change but would be very expensive to change. Having done a full-scale renovation, I think I have a much clearer understanding on what changes cost what things to prioritize when you're looking for a home versus things that I'm like, I could change that pretty easily and pretty affordably, either right away or down the road. So one thing that is very hard to change is the size of the rooms and the orientation of the house, the floor plan, things like that. So here in this area, for example, it's really common to have one of these kitchens that's sort of just in the middle of the space and was probably at one time fully closed off, but now just has a little window or like a half wall to open up to the rest of the house. I am not a huge fan of this layout. It's probably not a deal breaker for me, but it is something where like I'd have to live with that layout or knock down all these walls and like start fresh, which I'm not planning on doing. So layout is very important. Same goes for the size of rooms. Like you can't really change that. So make sure that it meets your needs. Another thing I have started paying attention to more recently is the way that the windows face. West facing windows are the best because that's what's going to get your afternoon sunlight and kind of like sunset vibes. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So the east and west facing windows are going to get the most direct sunlight, which is the brightest sunlight, the prettiest sunlight. Indirect sunlight is still fine, but if most of the windows face north or south, your house might feel a little bit darker versus if some of your main windows face east or west. One more thing on windows. Windows are pretty expensive to replace. So if I walk into a house and the windows some are cracked or like super clouded, or just feel like you can feel a huge draft coming in from the windows and they look very old, there's a chance that they need to be replaced. And if all the windows were put in at the same time, there's a good chance they all would need to be replaced. And that's a really, really big expense. So of course it's something you can do, but just keep in mind that windows are expensive to replace. I would say same with cabinets. It's very easy to paint cabinets or to have someone paint your cabinets. Not too expensive, but to rip out all the cabinets and redo them, very, very expensive. Depending on where you get them, but if you want them to look nice, it's not cheap. Also, replacing cabinet knobs, not expensive at all. So if you walk into a house and you're like, ugh, with the kitchen, think about how much it would be elevated if you painted the cabinets and swapped out the knobs, because those are two fairly easy things that, in my opinion, can like completely transform a kitchen. Next thing is floors. I ideally like to look for floors that are made from like authentic materials like wood, concrete, tile, like stone. But again, that's kind of just on my nice to have list at this point, because a lot of the houses in this area have like the plastic vinyl floors. It used to be on my must have list to have wood floors, but at this point it's just, I don't know, it's really hard to find what we're looking for where it also has wood floors, which is really frustrating. But I will say that those are more valuable. Like authentic materials are more valuable, sustainable, long lasting. If you walk into a house and it has carpet, you can usually either ask the agent that is there showing the house if there's wood underneath it, or you can kind of peel up a corner of the carpet without messing anything up to see if it's like subfloor under there, which would mean there's nothing under there, like you would have to put in your own floors, or if there's wood under there that you could just refinish. That's usually best case scenario if you walk into a house and it's all carpeted, but there's like wood underneath. That's kind of like you hit the jackpot. Next thing is ceiling height. Again, that's something that you can't easily change. If you're in a one-story house, sometimes you can vault the ceilings, but it's not cheap. If the ceilings are super low when you walk into the house, know that that might be a bad sign, because it would be hard to fix. And on the flip side, if you walk in and there's nice tall ceilings, that's like a huge plus in my book. Okay, here's my list of things not to worry about too much. Paint, like I said, with the cabinets, you can paint anything relatively cheaply and easily. And if painting's not your thing, you can hire it out for someone to do, and it's not too expensive. Light fixtures. Every time I walk into a house, I think about how different would this house look if I painted every single wall a warm white and replaced all of the light fixtures with something that's more my style. Just like, even if I don't end up fully doing that the second I move in, that really helps me see the potential of a house, because it's amazing how much of a difference that can make and how ugly a house can seem when it really does have that potential. So those are like the two number one things I would say. Faucets and other fixtures are also fairly easy to switch out. So if all of the faucets and things like that are like really ugly, you can over time buy new ones and switch them out. And I'm not going to say it's cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than other big fixes you might have to do, and it makes a big difference. Same with appliances. Not cheap, but like it shouldn't make or break your decision to buy a house is the appliances, I guess is what I'm saying. Also, backsplash and countertops is something that I have decided are okay to, like, if I hate them when I walk into the house, I'm gonna say that's okay. Those are things I can save up to change within like a year or two. Okay, the last section that I want to talk about is your inspection. So let's say you get to a point where you love a house, you made an offer on it and it got accepted, and you're in your like due diligence period. In this due diligence period, you're going to have an inspection done on your house. And so an inspector is going to go in and they're going to take hours and hours to look at every inch of the house and give you a full report. If you've never had this before, if this is like your first time buying a house, don't be freaked out by the inspection, because the inspector is going to note like basically every single thing that they see. I just wanted to share sort of my thoughts on what to pay close attention to and what could actually be red flags that you might want to consider either not buying the house or asking for a chunk of money from the seller to fix those things, or asking the seller to fix them before you close on the house. Like I said, all things like chipped paint and, even like some cracked siding on the exterior of the house, things like that are pretty minor, and you're gonna see tons of like little things like that. The main systems of the house is what you want to pay attention to in the inspection. So that's things like HVAC, plumbing, electrical, insulation, foundation, roof, water damage, and drainage. Just all of those things. I'm not going to go into tons of detail, but all of those things we had to deal with in our last house, in our Colorado house, like literally every single one. And every single one was very expensive. So all that is to say, take advantage of your due diligence period, that time period where you can get your earnest money back. If you pull out of the contract within the due diligence period, you get that back. So 2 times now in the past 3 or 4 weeks, Jake and I have gone under contract on a house and then pulled out during the due diligence period and gotten all of our earnest money back. And that's sort of my main tip when I talk about the inspection and this due diligence period is like, if you're buying a house and this is your first time buying a house and your offer gets accepted and you're so excited, like, I don't want to be such a bummer, but it's not over yet. Like, you've literally walked into the house maybe 2 times and you have to make sure that it's a smart idea to purchase this house, especially if you're looking at older houses, you know, houses that were just renovated and maybe cheaply renovated. You really want to kind of like see what's underneath before you give literally all of your money buying this house. So yeah, I really hope that's helpful and not too sort of negative. I just feel like I would have wanted to watch a video like this early on in this journey because buying a house is so confusing, honestly, and so stressful and so exciting, but it's only exciting if you like end up picking the right house. It's very important to pick the right house and to not overspend and to really know what you're looking for. So hopefully that gives you guys just a little bit more insight into the process and what I think would be helpful to look out for. If you have any questions about this, please leave them in the comments and I'd love to answer them. I'm going to continue making videos like this in this series. The next one is going to be things I wish I knew going into renovating a house. And things I'm kind of gonna do differently this next time around. So if you're interested in that, definitely subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.